Welcome back to the Telosive EV podcast, ladies and gentlemen, for a very special episode.
How'd you get in my house?
You don't know this, but I can unlock any door.
Wow.
How do you think we got into Aptera and Telos so easily?
You're right. We had to use some of that 007 or Mission Impossible
I
skills
them.
that we picked up. What? Your charisma levels are so high.
It's true. It's very true. The hair doesn't help, but how are you?
Good. How about you?
I'm good. I'm glad we're continuing these EV adventures in the Bay.
Yeah.
We're checking out stuff we can't talk about now, which is fun to say.
In a way, yeah.
It's a bummer in one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, that's just kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, there's so much that's changed just since we started doing these podcasts.
I was thinking about that. Something that we did do since you've been in town is we got to see the Lucid Gravity.
Oh, yeah.
In which you were bringing it up, or no, Louise was bringing it up.
Oh, she was?
Last time I think they came to that you guys came to that Lucid store.
Oh, yeah. Was
when the white Lucid Air was there and you couldn't touch it. The doors were open, but you couldn't touch it. Couldn't get inside it at all.
I still use that B-roll sometimes. That was the first time, I think. That was before deliveries, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was very early. And they were like, hey, we have a showroom. You can check out the Air. But yeah, you couldn't touch it.
No.
It was so walled off. And it was like, here we are all these years later. It was like 4 years ago now.
Really? Has it been 4 years?
I think it was 2020. Maybe not.
I would say 2021, maybe.
Okay. I think it was either early 21 or late.
I'd say at least 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. It was a while back. And now there's a lot more Airs. But I was even thinking more than that. Like, there wasn't any electric trucks on the market back then.
No, none.
We were talking about, Ford's going to do something, and hopefully Rivian.
Well, the Cybertruck was announced before you and I met as well, so that was a hot topic to discuss.
And we got to check one out at a showroom together recently.
Yeah, we got to sit in one
at the same time. We've both sat in it separately, but it's just, it feels very much like we're living in the future more and more, because I just recall so vividly the days where there was no electric trucks. Cybertruck was this like hypothetical dream. Mm-hmm. Speaking of dreams, and then Lucid, the Gravity was like this teaser, and there was a lot of talk about.
It wasn't even a teaser; it got leaked at the time.
Oh right, yeah.
They found it.
It leaked first
in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the Bay Area. That it was like right before one of their events that they're going to talk about. I don't know, either their power walls or something else, or maybe their whole lineup of Lucids.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that they were, I guess, driving along, I don't know, somewhere in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
Right.
And someone caught a nice little spy shot of what the Gravity prototype looked like.
There were just a couple of dark images on the website of what it looked like. They were like, stay tuned. It was like, you couldn't see much. And now the fact that, we can just show up and look right at it, and we're now at the start again, like the Air, where it's like, you can't touch it, so we still can't sit in it, which is a shame, because it looked great. It looked ready to me.
I liked what the interior was at least promoting in terms of the carpet on the side of the wall was a little bit weird.
That was interesting. I can't tell exactly what the texture was like, because we couldn't get really close to it, but you could tell it wasn't flat plastic,
No, it reminded me of my Honda Civic that had carpet that went up to, well, it's kind of like the Model Y or maybe the Model 3.
Yeah.
The carpet goes all the way up to a certain level, and then it meets the plastic that is part of the center console.
Right.
And so it's somewhat like that on the Gravity when you're getting in the second row or even trying to meander into the third row where the second row has to be pushed forward.
Yeah.
And the carpet goes all the way up to almost your shoulder if you're sitting in the third row. Mm-hmm. So that was something perplexing that I'm interested in seeing if they're going to either bring that down, like bring the plastic a little bit further down and cut down on the carpet that high.
Right.
Or if they're just going to choose a different material.
Yeah, they could. It might be one of those prototypey things where they're like, who cares? Mm-hmm. No one's going to touch it. But it also could be one of those noise isolation features where they're trying to reduce the amount of cabin reverb, which I didn't notice until I started driving around the Pure. with the body colored roof is I was like, oh, this is way quieter. Like when you don't have a bunch of glass over you, it doesn't pick up as much wind noise. And even when we first got our car, I noticed the sound, the reverb in the Model 3 was quite noticeable compared to our old car.
Right.
And I get why Tesla does it. On one hand, you can kind of look at it as a luxury feature, like, hey, I can see through the top. But also just like manufacturing simplicity. It's just glass, glue.
Well, you have to
They're
cut
here.
the glass as well with a body colored roof or just a metal roof.
Yeah,
You can just stamp that out, kind of like many other companies that pretty much make that.
right.
It's nothing new technology. It's just
No.
stamping out metal. So
But there's more layers to it.
there is an insulation layer, I agree,
Uh-huh.
but I think part of that noise that we notice in EVs is pretty much the lack of an engine there.
That too.
So you
Everything
don't,
else is enhanced.
Yeah.
You don't have an engine covering it all.
yeah, well, you don't get a low or medium hum going on in the vehicle that you're getting used to. That kind of like that white noise.
Yes.
For those that fall asleep to white noise, it's pretty much the same.
It is.
But I guess I'm trying to explain a gas car and an engine.
Oh, you're right, though. You're right. It's like, because it's always there, you kind of don't hear it.
Yeah.
In a gas car. You're not like actively like, oh yeah, there's the engine.
Unless you're slamming the acceleration pedal.
Yeah. When you're just cruising, it's just idle noise, and that kind of kills off everything. But
It was kind of weird though when we went to the Lucid showroom. Is walking in, there's the Gravity right there front and center with a fence around it.
yeah.
And then weirdly enough, they've got a Zenith Red Air Touring Lucid Air in the back that you could just get in and play
Yeah,
around
you
with.
can touch that one all you want.
Like in a matter of like 2 years, sure, why not?
Yeah, no,
Monkey
at this
around
point,
with
they got more than they can sell, so.
I never got approached at all when I walked in. I think
Yeah, they were pretty chill.
yeah, they're just. You have any questions? No. Okay.
Yeah, they were pretty nice about it. Unlike other electric car companies I've experienced, they didn't mind me filming,
Cool.
from what I could see. Uh, there were other places I've been where they don't like us to record, which I don't understand personally. If you have a car on display that you're letting people touch, you want people to look at it,
Right.
admire it, share it online. It's weird to me that they'd be like, yeah, look at it, touch it, get close to it, but don't share it with anybody. It's like, especially if you're not signing anything, you're just walking in the door. It's
Right.
like- so Lucid, the employees were right there next to me as I was recording B-roll. They were just like, do your thing. I was like, thanks.
Thank you.
But I wish they'd let us touch it. But
You've become a bit of a Lucid fan over the past, maybe not a couple days or a couple weeks, but
yeah,
it seems like 2024 has softened or at least enhanced your positive opinion
yeah,
on Lucid.
we should talk about that, I guess.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Well, I'm interested in, like, you've made videos and all that. I haven't really,
Yeah,
to be honest, I haven't watched any of the videos.
That's okay.
I've been busy with a bunch of other stuff.
that's okay.
But I still have the same concerns about Lucid.
Yeah,
Of if the UAE or Saudis, whoever's funding them,
Saudis. Yeah,
if they want to cut their funding for any reason, something a lot more interesting comes around, either on the European side that we won't see here in America.
or Aptera.
That'd be interesting. I think they're more
Yeah.
interested in bigger or more sportier vehicles. You can tell from
For sure.
their police force with their hypercar.
And I think the Saudis there's a high concentration of millionaires. So they probably appreciate luxury.
Yeah.
And that might be part of the reason they're not as into Tesla. Because Tesla's kind of trying to become as I've always said, the McDonald's. They want to sell the most. They're like, how do we get these cheaper? Let's make the cheapest car. They're kind of the Corolla of the EV industry in a way. Maybe not Corolla. The Bolt is the Corolla. The Tesla's like the Camry, the California Camry.
Yeah. Well, it could, like the Civic and the Accord.
Yeah,
The Accord, I
that's a
believe,
good
is a
example.
little bit more. have to look at that. It's been a while since I've looked at that.
I forget the ranking, but for some reason I believe Corolla to be like
it's the
cheapest,
lower end.
the lowest of the low, which is why I'd say the Bolt being as affordable as it is. Even though they're not making them anymore, you can find them used now for like 14 grand.
Sure.
And I checked with a few dealers because I was curious. I was like texting him. I was like, is that before or after the 4,000 used credit? And they said before.
Wow.
So some of these places would literally, it's used, of course, but the battery packs were replaced in them. Mm-hmm. So even though the car has 40, 50,000 miles, the battery only has like 20,000 or 10,000. And they're selling them for like 10,000, 11,000. I was like, that's pretty hard to beat. I mean, the charging isn't amazingly quick, but anyway, if Tesla's focus is all on mass market scale and Lucid's trying to double down on no compromise, like luxury, like everything super high quality, premium, I see why a culture that appreciates more of that attention to detail would be more interested in a brand like Lucid.
I get that, but it still seems like they've got a lot of work to do or a lot of improvement to be had with their software and a lot of their hardware as well.
Yeah, the software is definitely not all the way up there. From what I've heard from the people I've talked to about Gravity, it's very much a rethinking of the software from Air. Mm-hmm. It's not...
it's got a horizontal screen in there as well.
Yeah, that was a good call. There's also no more borders between the curved driver display.
Oh, that's nice.
It's one seamless screen. But it's also on the back end, from what I've read. People were telling me, they didn't tell me not to share this, so I hope it's okay. But they told me that the infotainment processor that's powering Gravity is like a order of magnitude larger infotainment. Like what they figured out with the Air was that they went to low powered with the thing that powers it, which is part of the reason like the navigation can be so choppy, which is always a problem I feel with startup companies is they want to do their own navigation, but then you try to interact with it and it's like
boop.
It's very choppy.
Boop.
And maybe that's why, maybe flipped is drastic, but I've come around more on Lucid because I drove a Fisker. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've seen how bad software can get. And also, it's worth mentioning that pretty much after watching legacy automakers, startups, and, the in-betweens like Tesla, everybody has launch issues. I don't think I've seen anybody be immune to some kind of recall, even if it's physical. At launch, usually they discover a bunch of problems, and then it takes a few months after start. And I think a lot of people, if they're doubtful of the company, will cling more to those issues, even though they're kind of standard. Like pretty much any product that gets released, especially in EV, which is as complicated and intricate, there's something comes up. Even Tesla, who's probably delivered more than anybody, is like, oh yeah, the gas pedal goes up and gets stuck.
Yeah, that's a mistake on there.
It's like, how did you not see this? But made by people mess up. So it's a fairly simple recall, but it's still a recall, and it's still something that you can't fix with a update.
No, you have to physically get some technicians in there to patch up some of the issues from the manufacturing floor.
And Lucid, I'm sure, had some of those, and they had quality control issues in software. But yeah, after driving the Fisker, I went to the Lucid. I went, this isn't that bad.
Maybe I've been too harsh.
I was like, I know it's a lot of work to try to get software right. I think they probably would. I don't know what the infotainment is in the Air, but it's definitely not keeping up with the amount of data that they're trying to push in it.
No, it's like it'd be like an iPad running a Kindle app, but the Kindle app's from like 2005.
Right. Kind of. Or the inverse. It's kind of like a Kindle trying to run.
That's probably even better.
Yeah. It kind of feels like that. But I think the Gravity is putting in more of like what Tesla would do in their cars with like a big AMD, right? I don't know if it's an AMD, but apparently it's a desktop class chip.
Good.
Instead of like a Kindle processor. They're like, no, you can't compromise on the computer side. And that should help with the responsiveness and the smoothness of everything.
Sure.
Ideally. But
My whole issue with them is that they've just been too focused on the Air.
I agree.
And so
That's
moving
fair.
on to the Gravity is a welcome change that I
Mhm.
can't wait to see hit the
Yes.
road a lot more. And with
Yes.
seeing all the EVs here in the Bay Area, it'd be
Uh-huh.
nice to get a little bit of, uh, I guess, difference in both color and shape and size.
Yeah. Yeah.
For SUVs here. Like we
Mhm.
have a whole bunch of crossovers. This thing it seems more minivan shaped, which isn't something me and my wife like at all.
That's what your wife said.
We're not
She
big
liked
fans
it.
of you and my wife are very opposite in a lot of opinions, but
I love it.
she's
It's
not
good.
a fan of the shape of the Gravity, but she likes the idea that, and me too,
Yeah.
the idea that they're moving on to something new and they're
Yeah.
not just stuck in there. Even though it's only been 2 years or so that they've been producing it. It seemed like forever.
It has. There's just so much has happened in the EV industry since then. And I think it also felt longer because 2 years ago I was also fairly skeptical of the business model. I was like looking at the financials and I'm like looking at the cash burn, looking at the margins, and I was like, oh, well, this isn't going to work. This isn't sustainable. And my assumption that I've been proven wrong on over the time is that if their cash burn keeps dwindling and the demand for the Air isn't great, because you're right, they spent a lot of time and a lot of money engineering a high price luxury sedan, and that's not a very big market.
No.
There's not a lot of people willing to drop that kind of money on a sedan, especially from a brand new company.
Sure.
So there's a lot of concern about the longevity of the brand. I'm sure that affects the demand levels. So my whole thought process was, yeah, by end of 23, start of 24, why would the Saudis keep investing? They wouldn't give them more cash if the stock drops like that and the product's not selling. So they're just going to cease operations and run out of cash. But I was wrong. They're still like, no, keep going. They're still handing
It's
them
pretty
more.
much a bonfire that keeps on getting fed a big log.
Right.
And you keep on seeing this big log just burn up into charcoal.
Yeah.
But then another big log comes
Uh-huh.
a little bit later.
And that's probably why it's felt so long, is because when you feel like it's about to die at any moment and you have a bunch of people saying, oh, they're about to die, they're not going to make it, then it will probably make time feel a lot longer because it's like, oh, they're suffering, oh, they're going to die. But
almost like Fisker as well. It seemed like doom and
feels like
gloom
forever.
months ago.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're filing for bankruptcy. Or even before that,
yeah,
there was talk of they're not gaining any money. There's a lot of issues on the business side of things.
yes,
And so that was a hint at they're probably not going to be around much longer.
Yeah.
And here we are, like, almost halfway through the year.
yeah.
And they're still here.
They're still here. I mean, they have ceased a lot more operations.
Oh,
though.
sure. And
would say.
they've let go a lot of employees, and I'm sure
Yeah.
anything on the support network is just...
And their vehicles haven't been in production for months. They just straight up stopped making them.
Sure.
I don't think Lucid's done that, even though they probably should.
I think I would have to
probably-
look into it because it sounds like for a while they're pretty much not forcing, but heavily encouraging customers to choose a pre-existing model, kind of like what
Yep.
Ford's doing with the Mach-E's.
Right.
Instead of making a whole bunch more Mach-E's, they decide, here's what we have in inventory, take that. Even though that, for me, who was interested in like, oh, what's the bronze package look like on the GT Mach-E that they got? You couldn't find it in inventory, so they said it doesn't exist yet on the news site. So like, it exists. And you're just sitting there like, but I want this. Why can't I have this? So it's a little bit frustrating, but for the health of the business, it makes some sense of let's just match something with the customer that's about 90% what they have. And that's what happened with me and my Y.
Right. Is what we got.
Yeah. Here's what we have. It's what you wanted. It's just sport rims. Are you okay with that? I guess so. It looks better.
Yeah. They do look much better. I agree. But yeah, it's on the opposite end. Lucid has been adding showrooms, adding service centers, and then documenting the preparation for Gravity mass production and publishing. Like, here's the factory, here's the chassis building, here's the paint shop, and it's like, okay, this is expansion. So it feels like awkward first gen where they were like, yeah, it's kind of like Tesla in that regard. You know, they start with the Roadster and they go, this wasn't doing the shared platform in theory was a good idea. In execution was never mind. That wasn't a good call.
Right.
And I feel like Lucid kind of did that with the Air. maybe the Air will be around a bit longer than the Roadster, but
I would more compare it to Rivian, and where Rivian identified what people will likely want in a EV vehicle that's different than what most people are trying to sell right now.
Yeah.
So they decided a truck and an SUV was the way to go. What
Ton of
Lucid
demand.
should have done, I mean, should is always the word, of course.
They'll probably agree.
But what would have been nice is they could have taken the same approach as Rivian if they planned it a little bit, maybe not smarter, but at least more tactfully.
Yeah.
Of let's launch the Air and the Gravity like a year apart. And that would have probably helped with both their image and just financials as well. I mean,
True.
I mean, the financials would be, they'd be getting a kick in the pants in terms of investment, but they would have a lot more interest in their products because they're selling an SUV.
Right.
And sedan. So you've got that option, and it wouldn't look like the Air is having to hold up everything of the company.
Yeah.
Is that the Gravity, is helping out with a lot of that load.
Right. And I think that my guess is they probably wanted to start with the Air because they wanted the street cred. They liked probably the numbers of over 500-mile range, and they knew they weren't going to get that with an SUV.
No.
So if they do it with a sedan and then they get to brag about performance with the Sapphire, they wanted that street cred, but I don't think it was worth it personally. Like
they could have already in which they do sometimes about their motors and everything else that goes into the Air that was in a lot of Formula E products that they were pretty much holding up the whole industry.
Yeah, they're class leading with the size of the motor, the higher voltage architecture. You can still brag about that. You know, starting with the SUV probably wouldn't have got you the super high range, but
well, people love SUVs right now.
Yeah.
And being able to say it's an electric SUV that has a third row, a meaningful third row,
very comfortable third row,
is something to brag about. Like,
Yeah.
you have Cadillac still trying to get there.
Yeah.
Like, they announced, I think, the IQ, which is like the Escalade electric version. I think it's still a 2-row. I don't know if it's a 3-row. But it sounds like the Mystique is that Escalade comparison of a
and that's not till 2026.
Right.
That's still booked out. Whereas the Gravity, they're saying this year, hopefully. They reiterated first deliveries this year. Yeah, I mean, they're showing exactly what I would be looking for if I was like, is it going to come out this year? And they showed the, assembly line and everything coming together. So I'm like, yeah, that's the sign. They're doubling down on it. Of course, something could come up and it gets pushed back a little bit, but they definitely feel closer now that they're sending out multiple Gravities to showrooms. They're getting them out there. But
yeah, I was surprised by that. There was a picture of one, I think, in either New York or Maryland or somewhere else, and I thought, did they move it already from the Bay Area? Did I miss this chance of seeing it? Because that's what happened with the
R2.
No, well, the R3.
Oh, yeah.
But also the Sony Afeela was here in the Bay.
Right.
And a lot of my coworkers got to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just busy that week. So by the time I was free, like midweek or near the end of it, it was gone.
Yeah.
And I missed my chance at seeing the PlayStation
Because there's like
card.
one, right?
I think they only have one prototype.
It's just one prototype.
Yeah. Well, like one that's like a complete prototype.
Yeah,
that's pretty much embodying the vision of what it should be. Where they've got some other ones that are more of like, here's what we're thinking it might be as an idea.
Yeah.
It's very vague with some of those rolling wheels.
Right.
But for at least the one that they have carting around, I think it was in LA for a bit. I'm not too sure where they put it now.
Yeah.
But that would be the one to see. But I was very happy that the Gravity exists not just as one thing, but as multiple units that are prototypes.
Yeah.
But at least you can show it to multiple locations.
Right.
And not have it be kind of like what the R2 is, in which, to be fair, the R2 is not coming out for another 2 years.
They've got time. But yeah, there is only one literal R2 from what I've heard.
And that's what I could tell from seeing it in person. With
there's only that one, the one you saw. There's no other ones sitting around. I even heard they said that prototype is still built on a R1 prototype.
Oh, really?
R1 prototype. Yeah, yeah. chassis.
It's a modified one.
Yeah, it doesn't have the 4690s or anything.
Well, they have to force the doors closed, like I mentioned, I think 2 podcasts ago.
Right.
It's
a proof of concept.
Yeah.
It's a very different stage than, what Lucid's doing with the Gravity right now is honestly quite similar to what Tesla did with the Cybertruck. It was like once the first few prototypes had been made, they started sending them out, and they like, go to this showroom, and you can all look at them.
And which Tesla's still doing.
Yeah, they still have them out.
There's a white one here in the Bay that's just sitting in the showroom. And then the other showroom that we saw in Stanford had one just sitting out on the road.
Right. And I've seen pictures of, because the Lucid's headquarters isn't terribly far.
No,
they have
not too far.
Test mules that are wrapped, Mm-hmm. I don't know why they wrap them. We know what they look like.
It's because of, so the reason why they wrap them is because the panels underneath aren't the same color. So typically when you're making a panel, it might have a different color for some reason. They might be testing out different colors.
Yeah.
Or they just haven't painted it. And so the best way to do that, if like they're using a different, different metal or coating for a different process in testing the manufacturing of it, it makes total sense to then wrap it kind of like what you see with some of those Rivian R1T refreshes or whatever.
They wrap
supposedly refreshes or whatever they are.
I think
they've wrapped them so that way it's a cohesive pattern or color.
That makes sense.
Versus having something that looks very piecemeal, which looks very raw.
Right.
And which, like, as someone who is an engineer and enjoys seeing more raw like products, I'd be fine with it. But for someone to see it on the road, they're like, that thing's not even fit. They put the wrong panel on that thing. So it looks a little bit incomplete.
That's true.
I get it.
But there's been Gravity wrapped mules, quite a few of them around their headquarters, which is an indication that these are not one-off hand-built,
They're testing out the production line.
Right.
For some of their videos, they show some of the pieces moving around their Arizona plants.
It looks like it's coming together, but to come back to your point about the minivan design, which isn't for everybody, I agree, I acknowledge that, but that I think helps separate it a lot from, like, I think the big problem with the Fisker Ocean was not just the software, the execution, but there was nothing about it that was particularly unique. It didn't separate itself enough.
It had a solar roof that could move. It had windows on the back that could come down, but those aren't features that are worth buying the product over.
They're definitely not deal makers, in my opinion.
No.
Tesla figured out in the early days that the retractable sunroof, they were like, we have the data on how much people use that. We realized nobody uses that, so we took it out. And then, the solar, when you make a vehicle that inefficient, is practically useless. It's very, very little energy.
That statement surprises me that you say that, because you've been an advocate for putting solar on everything, even if it just means a trickle charge.
Yeah, but it makes a lot more sense if the vehicle is much more aerodynamic. Like even on the Lucid, it would make more sense. But the Fisker was shockingly inefficient, in my opinion. Like 3-ish miles per kilowatt hour, like low threes. Considering the design, I thought it would be a lot more than that. Like the fact that they had to ship 112 or 113 kilowatt hours in a pack that just barely goes over 350. I was like, that's a really big pack. I would expect more like what we get from a Gravity. The Gravity, at least at the unveiling, said would be around 112 kilowatt hours. So almost the same pack as a Fisker. And yet they're targeting 440 miles.
Well, that's Lucid's whole deal, is efficiency and performance. So they've already proven both in Formula E and with the Lucid Air that they can make it happen.
Right.
In multiple different packages.
Yeah.
And whatever trim and features that you want to add to it, it's still going to be able to do it with whatever wheel options that you can do. It's going to depend on whatever wheel options that you choose that impact the range, but at least you're still getting something that's comparable and or impressive to what you're looking for in a not like a touring. I guess a lot of their vehicles are kind of classified as touring.
Yes.
And the range is kind of there. So I would say that it somewhat matches up to what they're trying to put out as a definition for their vehicles.
Yeah. And that, I think, helps separate them, because Tesla doesn't seem that interested in making a real 3-row. SUV.
Not right now.
They've got the X, which is probably the closest thing, but that's still, you got the doors, so no roof rack, and it's still an egg, so you can't
It's very sloped.
right, you can't fit too much. Whereas the crazy thing is the Gravity is almost the exact same dimensions as the X. It's the
Interesting.
same length. I think within about an inch. The X might be a tiny bit shorter, but not much. It's like 0.2 inches
I
short.
would think so with how the roof comes out from the Gravity. There's a big overhang.
Right. It sticks out a lot. I think the Gravity is like an inch shorter. So it's a tiny bit shorter than
You mean
the
in
X.
height?
Yeah, in height. And I believe it's air suspension, so
Yeah,
it can
they
go
had it
up and
at
down.
the medium setting when we saw it.
Which impressed me because it was shorter than I expected in a good way. I like, my dream car is basically just like, the front end of a bullet train on wheels. Like I just like the super tapered and the amount of storage space they were able to fit. And this is shorter than an R1S, but with more cubic feet of capacity. So Rivian, I don't think is in trouble. It's just R1S is focusing on the off-road adventure aspect,
Hmm.
and then the Gravity's more focused on range efficiency. And I could see huge demographics for both. Like I think it's good that they found a way to separate themselves instead of kind of what we got from Fisker, which was here's another SUV. And it was 5-seater only, so that limits
Yeah.
the market for
It
it.
reminds me of the Land Rover Defender shape and
Mm,
size. I don't know if it matches up that much. I need to look at the dimensions.
yeah.
But
No,
at
I
least with
think
like
you're right. I
the
think it's pretty close.
the Defender, you have a little bit of justification with being able to take it off road and all that, even though it's
Yes.
expensive.
Right.
But with the Fisker Ocean, I don't know if anyone would take that off roading.
Well, the powertrain, I mean, it didn't have one pedal driving.
Hmm.
Even in the OS 2.0 update, which the Ocean I drove had, it still rolled around. It didn't know how to hold. So just like basic powertrain stuff that there was not much attention put into. So I imagine when you go off-roading, you'd experience similar things like, what? It's just, the powertrain's just on, off. It's not very like calculated. It doesn't feel very smooth. When I floored it, it just spinned, it peeled out immediately.
There's no ABS controlling.
Didn't feel like it.
And
Maybe there was, but it didn't feel very strong.
I think stuff like launches like that makes sense for something that in which we've had a heated debate on EV muscle cars,
Oh yeah.
because then you're hearing that noise, you're feeling that in the cabin, and it feels unbridled in a way, to use
Some people
Ford's
might like it.
definition of it. And that's
Yeah.
a lot of people like the idea of it's loose but also powerful.
Yeah.
But in like a crossover slash SUV shaped body, I don't think people are really looking for that in the
No.
product. They're
It
looking
didn't
for
feel, I mean, it'd be one thing if it was, kind of like the classic muscle car drag strip where the tires just burn out and they're squealing and then you just keep moving. But this wasn't, it was like slip, slip, grab again, slip again.
Ooh,
So it
okay.
feels uncalculated to me. It didn't feel like, oh, all the power. It felt like,
Did not
is
feel
the-
mature.
Is the car okay? Like, how many more boosts do we have left? It was like, and when you don't have that engine revving along with it, it probably doesn't help with the like.
That's why I
didn't
just
feel
pump in
confidence.
noise.
Yeah, pump in the sound, I guess. So I think having a way to separate yourself, because there's so many legacy automakers now and so many other companies making their own EVs, people are going to go, well, what does this have over the competition?
Mhm.
And I think Gravity, more so than any other SUV, gets to say, 112 cubic feet of space. They've got like a lightning style frunk,
Mhm.
which is massive. So Model X doesn't have that. R1S doesn't have that. Fisker didn't even have a frunk of any kind.
No.
You couldn't open that thing at all. And I think I heard you have to like unbolt screws to open the hood.
There's a few EVs that do that.
It's not a good idea. I mean, even gas cars, there's usually just a little latch.
I mean, it
off
shows
the hood.
where the engineering and focus went. And for a lot of it, like the Rolls Royce, it went into
Yes.
like comfort.
Mm,
And so that's where they pumped all of their time and energy into. And with Mercedes, it's all about comfortable ride.
yeah.
And decent range, but like still the Mercedes feel. So
they're all out with the luxury
yeah.
interior.
So their focus isn't on opening up additional storage in the front. They're going
Sure.
to fill that up with whatever components are going to
Yeah.
enhance their luxury experience.
I don't know what Fisker focused on.
I think they were just focusing on trying to get to production.
Release, yeah, you're right. That was the whole focus, was just get it out.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's done or working, just as long as you deliver.
Sure.
Before all else, which we've now learned, might not be the best
No.
idea. But Lucid gets to say massive storage space, not at the sacrifice of the footprint, still a reasonable size, and with better range than anybody.
Yeah.
Better efficiency.
And decent performance for an SUV
of
that size.
Right. The powertrain miniaturization stuff and the battery packs, how they like separate them for foot room, I think that will help them find their own demographic, their own audience. That it's like, oh, we're not going to be as spacious, we're not going to be as efficient with any other SUV. I was kind of shocked to see, the most efficient Model X gets about 3.3 miles per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
So they increase the storage space in the same form factor and increase the efficiency.
Yeah.
Like,
it shows that the
impressive.
ceiling isn't as low as you think.
Mm-hmm.
There's still much more room to grow.
Right.
In terms of how to, I guess, in the way that Rivian's also proving it, you can boxify something.
Yeah.
Make it look like a toaster on wheels.
Yeah.
But it's still able to go whatever range with not a massive battery underneath to try to, or not compromise, but to feed that need and want for that shape and size.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think with a lot of products that we're going to be seeing in the next decade, it's not going to be that focus on what looks to be a magic mouse on wheels from Apple. It's not going to be super sleek, in which you like that look.
It might be more minivan.
Yeah. Well, like Ford Flex and all that.
Oh,
like
yeah.
The weird toasters on
boxiness.
wheels.
Yeah.
I think we'll see a lot more of those with the maturity of batteries and motors and materials that we can use to spacify, I guess, our vehicles to make it feel like what we've been driving these days, or at least what most people drive these days.
Not everything has to be the egg.
Not everything has to be a crossover look, or Sportback.
I think a lot of what that stemmed from was Tesla sharing as many components and parts with the S and X as they could. I think they wanted a shared platform, and after rewatching the Gravity unveil, from what I've gathered, it's not a shared platform. They did not reuse much from the Air, is what I'm hearing. They said we could have just scaled it up, but it wouldn't have been as efficient, and we wouldn't have been able to take advantage of, I think they're using more aluminum in their underbody than steel, which the Air was more steel focused.
Helps with the weight.
So watching that unveiling again, and then going to the showroom and meeting with the employees and the customers and seeing that there's a new showroom and it's a service center. They showed us the back. They said, here's all the cars that, we can take in, if people need work done.
Yeah, big garage.
Yeah, big garage, lots of space. And they were like, this is where deliveries will be. This is where the test drives will be. And it was just, it felt like you'd have to be kind of insane or moronic to like keep your same perspective on the brand, which I had kind of a skeptical, doubtful perspective of them, but see all this progress being made. And
it's slow progress.
It is.
And they're also a startup company, so you still have to have that mindset of they can't do everything.
No.
Like, they have a limited cash pile that they can grab from, even though that the Saudis keep on throwing these big logs on the fire.
Yeah.
They can only do so much until they need to ask for another log for the fire. So I would think that, of course, it makes sense that they're slowly building up these service centers in a lot of different places, not just big cities, but we're getting towards smaller communities nearby.
Like
other smaller communities.
The closest one to me is not a major city,
No.
It's not it's not that big of an area, but it makes it feel a lot more real, I guess.
Sure.
To see like, oh, it's expanding outside of the major cities.
Yeah.
And they're focusing on service and inventory. And sure, it's not as fast as we'd all like, but still it's like there's actual progress being made.
Yeah.
And that made it feel a lot more tangible. Like, okay, even though I have my doubts on, can this company be self-sufficient? And it's going to be a huge problem if the Saudis ever decide to turn off this faucet that's keeping them afloat. But so far, so good. Like, so far, they're still doing it, you know? And that makes me feel more like, well, if they're still doing it, it's not because they're looking for profitability. Otherwise, they would have stopped.
I think they're still looking for it. It's just, you can't, like we've mentioned with Tesla and the Fremont factory, you can't just shut down the whole factory, move all the equipment around to make it a little bit more efficient, and then start up again, because that's going to take a long time for a factory of that size or a company of that size.
That's why Tesla was like, let's just build another.
Let's just build Giga Texas.
It's easier to start over.
Oh, hi, Siri.
It's easier to just make a whole new one that you have complete control over, and that's how you get a much more efficient assembly line and a lot more consistency, which is what Lucid's doing. They're not trying to retrofit an existing.
No, I think they're building off the side.
Right.
In which they already reserved that space for the Gravity, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, they had a big area out in Arizona that's just expand here, expand here, expand here. And I've been to Arizona. There's nothing out there. So they got plenty of space. They don't have to worry about trees like Giga Berlin, which is being taken over, it seems, at the moment. I don't know if you saw that footage. It's National Protest Week in Germany right now. And they had all these people storming Berlin.
It seems like Europe has that a lot, especially France. France, it's pretty much a weekly, or maybe not weekly, but it's an annual thing. Yeah. So I assume in Germany, with a lot of the activists there,
of all the companies and factories to protest, Giga Berlin is quite confusing to me. Like, it's an incredibly efficient assembly.
Some decisions aren't built on logic. And that's what we can see in the stock market and many other places.
That's true. But it's like the amount of water consumed for a Model Y compared to like a pair of jeans. It's like, I hope no one there wears jeans, because those use way more water. It's like all the recycling, and it's an electric vehicle plant. It's all dedicated to, like, zero emission.
Well, less emission than what the gas counterpart produces in its lifetime.
Oh, yeah.
Just proven scientifically.
Substantially less.
Yeah.
And they make lots of gas cars in Germany.
Yeah.
So the idea that we need to go after I don't get it.
Yeah. You mentioned, to change topics, you mentioned earlier with the Fisker Ocean peeling out and all that, and like you hear a sound and the wheels are spinning, and you only get like 500 of those or whatever.
And I used one.
I don't know if we talked about this. No, we didn't talk about it on the podcast last week because we talked about Supercharging in the week before.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have it yet. But I got the acceleration package on the Model Y.
You did.
If anyone missed it on Drew's YouTube channel.
That was fun.
In which it's been impressive. It is noticeable a lot more these days.
Good.
My wife sat in the car one day and I gunned it, and she noticed it as well.
She could tell.
It's it is pretty much that half a second acceleration that
it was
apparently
cool
you
to
can
time.
notice. Yeah, that was great. I think
we didn't
you did a
do that
job.
when we were just recording it. We just hit record and watched what happened. And we were like, could you feel it? And it was like, yeah, that felt like a little bit of a punch. But then I threw in the timer in Final Cut, and I was like, was there actually a difference? Some people pointed out that, it wasn't the exact 4.4.
No, it's a little bit slower, but there's a whole lot of other factors in there.
We weren't on a track. We weren't on level ground.
No, we drove all the way out to the mountains, actually similar to where the Gravity was first spotted.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we were around that area doing some 0 to 60s, in which, one, it's a public road, and I was predicting out there wouldn't be that many cars.
Yeah.
Turns out that prediction was wrong. There was
a lot of cars.
And we also took a lot more footage that wasn't shown there, in which, because there were so many cars, I didn't feel comfortable taking off the plates.
There's a lot of cars. We were in kind of a residential area. And also, we were limited on time. It's partially my fault. I had to get going by a certain time.
Well, we had the podcast later that day anyway.
Yeah, it's like, I got to get home. We have we had like 1 hour.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I got to leave in an hour. Can we do an acceleration boost video? It was like, if we go right now. So we didn't have time to like go to a closed course, or even an empty parking lot was hard to find.
Not in the Bay, no.
Not where we were. Could we find like a wide open empty space?
If you're like a Bass Pro Shop here at like, either very early in the morning when no one's there, or do it like midday on like, I don't know, a Monday or Tuesday when no one's there.
This was like 11 a.m., I think.
It was around like 11 or 12 o'clock.
So because of that, we were on,
There's a lot of limiting variables.
It was kind of a turn, if anything. I think you were going a little uphill, slightly. It wasn't flat. I can tell that much.
So there's a lot of, pretty much there's a lot of variables that were not doing the system justice.
Yes.
In which even considering that, you still do notice that boost.
Yeah. Because what impressed me was how it was exactly half a second.
It was pretty close, yeah.
Even on the Final Cut, like, computerized timer. It was...
And that was you going frame by frame, trying to figure out when to stop.
Right, because I listened to the audio. I was like, the second I hear the flex of the pedal is when I count from 0. Not when you see the number on the screen, 0 to 1, because it takes a split second. But it was recorded at 60 frames a second, so I had lots of little audio bits to pick up on.
Sure.
And
visual cues as well.
Yeah. So I wasn't expecting it to get the exact, 4.4, because I know Tesla probably has rollout and maybe there's more traction or whatever, but
the wheels as well. I'm not running on new wheels. They're like a year or two old.
Does the length of the battery pack and the motor have an effect? You think?
The length of the battery pack?
The age, I mean.
The age, yeah.
Like you have basically the first Model Y. I feel comfortable saying that because we know they tested a bunch, and those were the earliest VINs. Mm-hmm. So you don't have VIN 1, but you basically took delivery.
No, we talked about, or when you first checked it out, and then you talked with Nick and Randy on the podcast right after, I believe I told you, it is within the first, I think, 150.
I'll just round down.
Sure.
I'll say 1.
All right.
You're the first non-employee. There were employee deliveries that probably took the first 100 or so. So... If you're not the first one, you're within the first 100, I think, of non-employee
I think we met someone at one of the Tesla dealerships around here who had like one of the first 1,000 Model 3s.
Oh, wow.
In his possession.
I'd be curious.
Or maybe not a 3. It was either a 3 or a S.
Okay.
But that was impressive to hear about as well.
Yeah.
I consider my situation as very lucky.
Yeah.
But hearing that other people, it just doesn't ring in my mind that, there's also 3s, S's, and X's. And Cybertrucks as well. Yeah. That are in that same bracket, of course, because you can't just immediately start at VIN 1000.
No.
I mean, you can, but then that means you still have a whole bunch of VINs that you either made that you're just ignoring.
Yeah.
Or VIN 1000 is actually just VIN 1.
There's just a bunch of test models that they throw around there. But I imagine a powertrain, your car has over 60,000 miles.
About 65 almost, yeah.
That age probably has... Again, it's not much if there is an effect, but there's probably a little bit of diminished returns after a certain amount of usage.
That's definitely... I'm glad you brought that up because this week, I don't think it was due to our testing the acceleration.
I hope not.
I don't think so, but now there is a noticeable squeak occurring whenever I turn the steering wheel, and it's not quiet. A very noticeable squeak to where everyone looks around at you as if like you're revving your engine like a muscle car.
I parked at the showroom we checked out, like probably 8 or 9 cars down from you, and I could hear it. It was incredibly
It's
loud.
noticeable inside. It sounds like it's coming from the steering column, but then you're sitting outside and it sounds like it's coming from the steering mechanism on the outside underneath the frunk, but like
super loud.
Super audible, so it's going into its first servicing. Like, not because they put...
like a quick delivery service thing.
Well, in which, the only other servicing my car has gotten from Tesla was panel adjustment. And that was for the hatch, in which then they just replaced.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is quite hilarious that they just replaced the whole thing instead of trying to adjust it, and they just couldn't. It was a bad hatch, I guess.
Early days.
But now this is an actual issue, and unfortunately, the basic warranty's gone for my vehicle, so it'll be... It's a nice test case for you to watch me as someone who's been curious. 4 years in to see what problems might crop up over time. How much is it going to cost?
Out of warranty repairs is probably my biggest concern for EV ownership. Not so much the battery pack. I think that's way overhyped. Everybody turns that into... It always makes headlines because my wife just saw one. There was some guy in Canada that had a Hyundai Ioniq hybrid.
Okay.
And his battery went bad, and they quoted him like $15,000 to replace it. And I was like, on a hybrid? That's like a 7 kilowatt-hour pack, if even. It's probably less. Mm-hmm. That should not be 15 grand.
It might be all the pretty much the time it will take the technicians to get that battery out.
He said it wasn't counting labor.
That wasn't okay.
I was like, that's insane.
That's like
there's something wrong there. I was like, either Hyundai is quoting incorrectly, or their battery supplier is screwing them over.
Something's happening in the chain.
That's not normal.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way that it costs 15 grand to replace that.
Sure.
So, but of course, the damage is done media-wise.
Oh, yeah, well,
if a news report does that.
Similar to that, Hertz came out that with their electric vehicles, they charge you an exorbitant amount to have it charged up, either I think before usage or after usage.
Oh, yeah.
They charge you like, I don't know, $120, $150.
Wow.
For having to charge up the vehicle. In which you and I both know it doesn't cost that much to charge up like a Model 3 or a Bolt. Or
that must be a time thing. They're just like, we don't want the time to have to go drive it somewhere or charge it up or try to charge it up ourselves. Or
possibly so. But now there's that news going around of it costs hundreds of dollars for Hertz to charge this electric vehicle for customers. And the customers have to pay for it.
It's very negative press.
Even though it doesn't cost that much. So, it's not the best situation, which a lot of people, thankfully, there is a lot of logical reasoning or logical heads in that matter.
That's our job as the EV community.
Well, just like I've seen a lot of, I would say, people who aren't super passionate about EVs, and they look at the numbers and they pretty much say that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
There's a few podcasts I listen to that cover that, and they're like, that doesn't make sense. And which helps me, or it makes me feel better. Yeah. Because it doesn't feel like we're still trying to fight FUD every single day. Mm-hmm. That some people are actually thinking a lot more critically.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people that just own the cars, so they know from experience. But of course, it doesn't make headlines if... I don't know exactly what your problem is, but I've heard a lot of people say they've had control arm issues with the Model 3 and Y. So if it does end up being something like that, it's a couple $100 usually. It's not, 10 grand. Like, that won't make a headline.
No.
Man replaces control arms on out of warranty Tesla for $300.
No, it's more of recall on control arms is the bigger.
That doesn't make a big news story. So I see why those take off, but it does paint a bad picture. But people are like, "What about? Aren't you worried about the battery? How long is the battery?"
That's actually something my extended family asked me about when I was visiting them.
It's a very common concern.
And I told them there is my buddy who owns a Model 3 has a battery that probably can go 1,000,000 miles.
Yeah.
I was talking about you and your car. And they were like, What? 1,000,000 miles? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, but then you have to replace it. I'm like, maybe.
If the car lasts that long.
That's 1,000,000 miles. You're going to have...
I'm not sure the rest of the car will last 1,000,000 miles.
Yeah.
Especially because, your issue's way bigger, but I'm having a lot more creaks and rattles lately.
Welcome to the club.
It's very annoying, and...
I got one in the back right that's been there since day one.
Yeah.
No one can figure out where it is.
It's very inconsistent, though. It's not. I can't repeat it, which is partly why I'm at 41,000 miles.
You're catching up.
So my warranty is still on for a little while longer. I'll probably run it out this year because we have a ton of road trips coming up. But my wife and I were debating. She was like, should we get these creaks and rattles looked at before the warranty expires? And I'm like, maybe, but when they're so hard to repeat the noises, and I haven't had great service experience, I'm not convinced that in trying to fix one problem, they will create another,
Right.
I'm like, is this worth going into service? Partly because we're so busy these days.
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
Adulting is tough.
There's so much work stuff, and my wife's working, and, family stuff that we have to stay on top of. I don't want to go, I went to the service center 3 times after we took delivery to try to get the wind noise thing fixed, and it still didn't, they never quite fixed it, but
no,
it's hit and miss. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it's there. Same thing with the
Sometimes you
crease.
just have a bad egg.
And I'm kind of reaching that point now where I'm starting to accept, okay, you do not own a new car anymore. You know, it's not that old, but it's got a lot of miles. There's going to be some creaks and rattles, and you might just have to live with it.
I'm all right with that, but your car's still new, Drew.
I mean, calendar-wise,
Calendar and mileage-wise.
I think
40,000 miles?
We've put a lot, it's gone through a lot with, like, hard roads.
It lives in
high
California, Drew. It's
lots of
not in
charging.
Utah or Michigan.
Yeah, I'm just like, but what can I do about it? I'm not
Right.
convinced the service center is going to fix it.
No. I think
So
more attention towards improving quality control is the
hope.
hope, but of course, as we've
it gonna
heard,
happen?
as we've heard
Yeah.
about Fremont, it doesn't sound like it's going to be an easy solution to fix that.
Yeah, and I hope that it's been addressed in the refreshed 3, which changed a lot. But
That, or I would say it's definitely addressed in the Model Ys built at Giga Texas, because that's
I
a
hope
more
so.
streamlined production
yeah,
compared to what Fremont's supposed spider-like
yeah,
web of cars and body panels moving different buildings, different locations all the time.
right. No, it's definitely the rest of the car that I'm not convinced will get to 1 million. Little things breaking here and there.
Sure.
And some of them I've seen out of warranty have been pretty pricey, like headlights in particular.
Yeah.
I've seen people pay well over $1,000 for a headlight fix on a Model 3 and Y, and I'm like, really? So I hope those LEDs last a long, long
Put a
time.
flashlight in there.
And that might, because in the past, like, I haven't been that into repairability because most of my tech was just, phones and
It's small tech
tablets,
that you
small
eventually
tech.
just give to a friend, or
Yeah.
you give it back to Apple.
And nothing, I usually don't break my smaller personal tech, but if the financial incentive for me to start becoming a more repairability guy that tries to fix my own car, if now I can save thousands of dollars to fix it myself, the incentive now is much higher. So I might be a lot more interested in that in the future, figuring out how to work on my own car and try to replace things myself if Tesla's going to charge us an arm and a leg for labor.
Sure.
I might start going, okay. Little things, like headlights or something. It might be like, okay, what does this actually require? How much things do I gotta pull off and pop off?
Another thing that you could also consider is Tesla sometimes does a lot of those trade-ins deals because they're trying to push delivery numbers.
True.
And if you get to the point where there's a lot of things to be repaired on the 3, but Tesla's going to take it for a decent amount for a trade-in on a new Model 3.
Yeah.
That's something I think about with my Y, even though it is a low VIN. I think if it gets to the point where it's unbearable to deal with and I can't repair it on my own, then why subject yourself to that struggle if it's not worth it in the end, and you're going to be dumping not hundreds of thousands, but like tens of thousands of dollars into just fixing something that I mean, you would hope would be easily fixable within $1,000 or more, but sometimes that's not how the dominoes fall.
Yeah.
So being able to have that
would have to make a lot of sense.
Well, I just think about at the showroom that we went to. Had a Quicksilver Model Y in it.
Oh yeah.
And it was a beautiful color.
Gorgeous.
It had Gemini wheels, in which the Gemini wheels kind of match the Quicksilver. But I've spec'd one out on the website, and I still think the induction rims match the body of the Model Y a lot better, even with the Quicksilver paint.
Aesthetically speaking, they look better. Functionally, I would still take the Geminis just for range.
It would be nice to get the same treat. I believe, was it the Tempest? I don't even know if they're even called Tempest still. The long range rims on the Model S. They look somewhat similar to the Gemini rims on the Model Y, but they're darker.
Yeah.
I would like that on the Model Y. Is like basically take those Gemini rims,
just darker Gemini,
darken them up, and which you can do that third party. But it would be nice to just get it straight from Tesla.
I agree. That's a good idea.
Darken it up.
That's a good call.
It would make it. I mean, we've seen from the new refreshed Model 3 rims, they look good.
Oh yeah.
Not one of them looks terrible in my opinion.
I prefer the 18-inch ones to the 19-inch ones, but
19 has always been kind of the odd duckling in the lineup.
I'm just not a fan of lighter shade rims personally.
Chromier colored ones,
and they're kind of backwards. Like on the 3, the darker rims are on the smaller tires, the lighter, and then the Y it's the opposite. So I'm like, just go do it like
consistency. Come on.
Yeah, come on. Just
These are both
dark, or just do all dark rims. I don't think people would complain. I think they have black Geminis in China.
I think so. Yeah.
I think so. Just move them over here.
When's that happening?
Put them on the LFP battery pack ship. You're already moving those over.
Sure.
But yeah, I think Tesla's probably having a hard time finding buyers for the Y for a bunch of different reasons. And I'm not saying this is the main factor, but I do think one of the primary factors is kind of everybody knows that the Y is due for a refresh. Like S3 and X all have now the ventilated seats, their rear display, and the Y is just kind of the odd one out that doesn't now. Mm-hmm. So everyone's kind of like,
I wouldn't say everyone.
That's coming.
I would say people who are paying attention, like very closely to the Tesla lineup, they are. But those that are new to it, they just see, Model Y is safest vehicle, and Model Y is best selling vehicle. Okay, let me go take a look, and then they see it and they consider it as, okay, maybe I can get used to this.
That's true.
But for those that, they would probably see that sacrifice of there's no ventilated seats in this at some point, where they cross shop it with like a Mach-E or a Blazer and see that, some of these actually do have these options.
Well, just so many of the showrooms now have a Refresh 3 and a Y.
Sure.
And
you can tell
it's only natural, even if you don't follow the Tesla news or Tesla community, when you're checking out both, you're going to say, well, this one looks pretty cool. You get in and you're like, whoa, the bezel's way thinner and the seat's nice and they redesigned all this. And
the afterglow or the ambient lighting. Yeah.
Right. You see all those features and you go, well, this is cool. And then you get in the Y and you went,
nothing.
What happened? Like,
it still has the, what's it called? The dash kind of coming around the doors a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But you don't have any of the ambient lighting. You don't have the ventilated seats.
Which even to an everyday consumer, I could see being a little confusing.
Well, especially like a crossover.
Why can't I get that in this?
Why can't I just change my heated seats in the back of this vehicle?
Right.
I've got no control of these things or the air conditioning vents as much.
Yeah.
Like I can change the angle, but I can't turn them on or off.
Right.
Having a button there would be nice.
Even little details like the button to open the door on the 3 being all one piece instead of a button within a bezel like it is on the Y. Little things that the consumer probably doesn't notice every little detail, but when they sit in both, they probably go, this just feels newer, but I don't want a sedan. Like, I still want the Y, but the Y needs all this. And Tesla probably unintentionally put their Model Y in this kind of awkward, like, it's the best seller and it's the most practical, but it's also the most dated now. It's kind of in this awkward, so they're like, colors, ultra red, quicksilver, here you go. And it's like, finally they're doing the long range rear wheel drive.
It took forever.
Oh my God.
The car that we both wanted.
I know. I think we both had an order.
I ordered it day one.
The rear wheel drive?
The rear wheel drive, and then December had to change it.
Wow.
Or it was in November or December, they got rid of it.
Right, because they were like,
never mind. Dual motor all wheel drive.
I'm thankful, honestly, they finally decided to, because I think that's a great trim. It's the cheapest one, and it has more range than
it makes sense.
Yeah.
If it is the long range, it has the longest range.
Well, it's just weird. I guess it's kind of the same with the S and X, but finally, for the first time in a while, the cheapest Y has the best range.
Yeah.
So that's going to be pretty practical.
It's going to make the standard range Ys not age as beautifully.
Well, it's still a software limited pack, the ones they were selling.
On the standards?
Yeah.
Okay. It's pretty much an all-wheel drive just with one motor.
Yeah. It's the single motor, but everyone figured out shortly after they started delivering the new standard ranges, the ones from last year.
The rear-wheel drive, is it all?
It was called this.
It was an all-wheel drive, wasn't it?
Well, this is why it's so confusing. There was the 4680 Model Y.
Yes.
That was all-wheel drive.
Yes.
They stopped making that.
Right.
Then they started making rear-wheel drive Model Y, which was 260. So it wasn't a long range. But then people started plugging in their like Scan My Tesla apps, and they started figuring out, hey, this pack is 80 kilowatt hours. They're just capping it. And it became really apparent when they started charging them, and the supercharging curve was like, and it was still pulling really high speeds at really high states of charge. So everyone said, I think this is just a software limited. We thought it was LFP when it came out because the weight was so high.
Yeah.
It wasn't the same weight as the standard range Y from 2021.
Mm-hmm.
That was just a physical reduction.
It wasn't also meeting some of the requirements for the tax incentive, right? Because I do recall it. There was that speculation of how is it not getting the full tax incentive? Or maybe I'm misremembering with the Model 3.
That might be the 3. I'm pretty sure the rear-wheel drive still qualifies.
It's funny that there's so much confusion around this.
They've tried many.
There's 4 or I guess 5 vehicles that Tesla makes.
Yeah.
For customers.
Yeah.
And there's just so many different versions in there that it's almost impossible to keep track of every single one. Which one's qualified, which ones didn't, which ones had these motors and configurations, which ones did not.
I had a viewer reach out this morning, actually, that was asking for help because he was like, I'm buying used. He doesn't want to buy a new one. And he's trying to figure out which model year has which pack and what. And it's like, oh, man, it is a maze.
Yep.
But, yeah, the 4680 Model Y basically should have never happened. It just wasn't very good. The charging curve isn't great, and the range isn't great. It was mainly just, can we build 4680s? Let's try. They were like, we can, but we probably shouldn't because this isn't great. And then the cyber cells were made with the better energy density. And they're like, okay, we can put those in the truck. But then for the Model Y, I think they're just all back to non-structural battery packs now because no Model Ys have 4680s anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just 2170s. And basically the rear-wheel drive is the same as the all-wheel drive, just without the motor, the front motor. They just take it out, and it's the partial premium interior. That's a whole nother can of worms. Gosh. So the rear-wheel drive takes out the subwoofer and a few speakers. They take out the parcel shelf. I think the fog lights.
Are the heated seats turned off in the back as well?
No, they've left those, thankfully.
Gosh, again, another variable.
Yeah, mine still says that on my spec, even though for a while now, for the past couple of years, they've just said all rear heated seats are there for free. Mine still says, if I go in the app, winter package included. And I was like, what's the winter package? And I looked it up and it just says rear heated seats. That's
stayed on everything package. Anyways,
but they like listing it. But yeah, I would be, if I was in the market for a Model Y right now, I'd be super tempted by Quicksilver. Mm-hmm. But I'd also probably wouldn't buy because I'd know the refresh is around the corner. And I'd be like, I would, if I could wait, obviously, I would probably just wait till next year for the refresh.
Sure.
And get the Model 3 treatment on a hatchback. I think once that comes out, a lot of their demand issues will probably go away. Because they'll get the tax credit. It'll be a hatchback, which is a much bigger market. And there won't be this like feature separation where like you have to compromise in some way.
Possibly.
We'll see.
We don't know. There's probably some other variables in there for sourcing certain parts that might be coming from China.
Yeah.
Or other locations.
Yeah. That's true.
We might be running into more barriers at that point.
Yeah.
So we don't know.
I think there's some EV market demand barriers too.
Yeah.
That people don't acknowledge enough of.
That's something that my extended family was also asking about is, has everyone that was excited about EVs bought an EVs? Because it seems like there has been a dip in sales.
Possibly.
And I'd say, yeah, the next tier of people that need to be convinced or want to be convinced. A lot of needs have to be met. They don't want the slopey looking thing. They don't want low range. They want higher range.
Yeah, higher range, lower pricing.
Comprehensive charging everywhere.
Better build quality. Yeah, which is why it's encouraging. And yeah, they gotta be cheaper. Especially, and I can't even blame them now when in a lot of places electricity has gotten so expensive. the gas.
You and I aren't even charging at home anymore.
No, well, that's just because of the.
Thanks to PG&E.
They did raise the price at my local supercharger, so now.
Yeah, but you got free charging, don't you?
I do, but I'm not counting on that always being there, knowing how Tesla's being run right now.
Who knows what's going to happen?
I wouldn't be shocked if they just shut that off at any time and just say, "Screw you." But you promised. I don't care. You signed.
Say what?
You signed the contract that blah 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 blah. There's probably some fine print in Tesla's referral program that says we can
take things away.
Take things away at any time.
I wouldn't takes away my acceleration.
Yeah,
back.
Honestly, I wonder. It's shocking to me that they haven't been sued for a lot of their FSD claims yet. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if they just start taking things away. Like, everyone was so convinced the Cybertruck would honor the price lock of FSD. And I kept telling people, no, read that pre-order agreement. There's nothing in there promising anything.
No.
Even the FSD. Everyone was like, no, you have that locked in. And I was like, I don't think you do. But...
Nope. And even so, you wouldn't want to lock it in at this point if you got that. If you reserved the Cybertrucks at a certain time.
Yeah, there was a period where you could lock in FSD at $10,000 with the Cybertruck, and now it's $8,000. That's hilarious.
Pretty funny.
That would be funny if when they finally get to you, they force you to pay $10,000 for FSD.
Oh, with my Cybertruck, or
if someone locked it in at that point, they said, "Okay, your order's ready. FSD is at $10,000." Oh, well, don't do it then. Oh, then you're at the back of the line. You have to cancel your order.
Sure.
Just take it at $8,000. It's practically the same price as when they unveiled it now.
Do you think the steering wheel nag is actually going to go away? It sounds like Mr. Techno King said that it is going away in the next FSD update.
I don't know if I believe him. It's hard to trust a lot of the things he says these days.
There's a lot of things that they've been promising with FSD that have sort of come to fruition in capability.
He did give me a free month.
Uh-huh.
He said that would happen, and it happened. He said they would roll out V12 for everybody, which they did, and vision-based auto park came out. But he also has been saying actually Smart Summon would come out since end of 2022.
Yeah.
He said it was a couple of weeks away in 2022. So that when that happens, I'm like, okay, what is actually going on? Like, also he tweeted, I think this morning, that they still plan on spending over $500 million on new supercharger locations in the next year. And a bunch of people saw that and were like, see? Nothing's changing, guys. But then a bunch of people were like, with what team?
Yeah, the team's gone now.
It's like, it's not just
like the fourth or fifth week of firings, pretty much.
Yeah, it hasn't stopped. Yeah, they laid off like over 300 people in New York.
Where they build the
Buffalo,
superchargers and
where
solar.
The chargers are made. So Elon says a lot of things, but to me, especially when he said things like 1 million robo-taxis by 2020, and actually Smart Summon is 2 weeks away, and then 2 years go by and it's still not out. I remember him back in 2020 saying they're releasing a long-range rear-wheel drive that just we didn't get till last week.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like the supercharger isn't just about writing a check. You need people to handle the logistics and the rollout.
And the same with FSD, which isn't a necessarily hardware-based product. I mean, it is hardware-based, but like a lot of the updates now are software.
And software to me is even more hypothetical.
Yeah.
And I'm far more skeptical of because
every tech company promises a feature on their announcement, and then you wait 6 to 8 months or maybe 10, sometimes 12 to finally see that feature become a thing.
Severely underrate the complexity of software. Mm-hmm. Even basic software is hard to make right and reliable. I mean, Apple's just $1 trillion company and they experience bugs and crap all the time.
Bunch of issues that they have to tackle every day.
And they've got practically unlimited resources and they still will release huge problems with iOS releases. So that's a fairly obtainable, steady software stack. Getting this whole like FSD thing is wildly speculative, which is why I'm overly hesitant to believe anything.
Like steering wheel nag going away.
Well, I guess the nag in my head is relatively simple to remove. It's not like removing the driver, but there's a lot of strings attached to the nag.
I think the nag can just turn into what we still already have is the camera watching your eyes
Exactly.
to make sure that you are watching the road.
That's all I want.
I got two of them on the drive up to visit my extended family of pay attention, in which I was just I wasn't on my phone, I wasn't doing anything.
No.
I was just looking out at some hills.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
It's super annoying, and I'm more skeptical of whether or not the NHTSA is going to let them remove the nag.
Which is funny because there's a bunch of other companies that don't have the nag.
Yeah, it's very unfair. I agree, but I also think that the reason Tesla's probably scrutinized the most is because Tesla's making the most bold claims.
Yeah.
Ford isn't saying Blue Cruise is going to be driverless by the end of the year.
No, they're marketing it more as a tool for drivers.
Right. So when the marketing of it, and most people probably don't even use it, NHTSA doesn't see that as a big risk.
No.
Because Ford isn't trying to convince people that, oh, this will be a robo-taxi. But when Tesla's straight up saying, no, your car later this year will drive your friends and family around, or it'll go out and make you money. Here's our app, and here's how it'll go out and make you money. It's like, okay, you're putting a narrative out there that is making people think this is so safe you don't need to be there. So basically, whatever NHTSA forces on Tesla will probably trickle down.
Sure.
It hasn't, but it's like, yeah, I acknowledge Tesla's probably scrutinized unfairly compared to the others, but
in some ways, yeah. In others, I think it's fair.
Yeah.
Based off of how much they're accelerating a lot of different things.
Right. And the over-the-air updates, I understand their skepticism with it because Tesla moves very quickly.
Yeah.
Elon could get version 12.5 out and say, this is amazing, this is really good, and technically have the power to just put this code in millions of cars that might have some horrible flaw in it.
Right.
So,
oops, it recognizes barriers as gates.
Yeah, right. Something like that could just be thrown off at a moment's notice. So that's why I think NHTSA is like very, very like, what are you guys doing? Make sure that the drivers are still paying attention because there's a lot of high expectations with it. So I would be personally a lot more interested in buying FSD or paying for FSD if it was just the eye tracking.
Yeah.
I think the usefulness of the feature and the ease of use would go.
And that's what I want to try soon is Super Cruise. I think we need to definitely test drive a Super Cruise.
That would be
enabled vehicles, either some GMC product or a Silverado EV or anything else that has that.
I think some
maybe
of
a
the new
Lyric.
Bolts have them too.
I think the Lyric has it.
Yeah.
In which those are on dealership lots, so maybe we'll try that next time.
Yeah, we
I
got to
think
find
the Bolt has it.
I heard the new ones,
The new ones?
2023 models do,
Really?
I think. But
I think
could
they've
be
got
wrong.
I feel like that's got a dampened version of Super Cruise because there's different tiers
Maybe.
of Super Cruise.
Oh, yeah.
I believe. Not like, I mean,
The different
many
tiers.
people recognize Ultra Cruise being eliminated, but there
Right.
are, just like Autopilot, different or used to be like Autopilot.
Yeah.
Different versions or
It's hard to
tiers
keep
of
track.
it, in
Yeah.
which we don't pay attention to it too much because we're more focused on what we've got in our cars,
Yeah.
being FSD and Autopilot. So
I got to admit, after losing FSD now and going back to free Autopilot, it's not bad. I'm okay.
it sounds like it carried some features from what you've noticed back.
That was funny. It still renders cars as far away as possible, which it used not to. And now it shows brake lights and tail lights, but it doesn't do anything with that data. It doesn't slow down when the brake lights are on. It's just showing you that for some reason.
Hey, they're there.
I can see it. But yeah, it's still free Autopilot for me is still kind of the perfect amount of assist.
That was a great decision by that company.
Yeah.
This is what the people deserve as a safety feature.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't do everything to the max, it still provides enough.
I still think it should stop for reds and stop signs.
Yes.
I think as a safety. That's not a convenience.
Does it do the stop light, or I guess the green light chime? Does it do that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a free thing.
That's a great feature.
I like that. Sometimes it's wrong though, which is kind of annoying.
Yes, you'll look up and it's a red arrow.
I'm on a red arrow.
Time
and
to go.
The green next to it will turn and it'll ding at you, and sometimes the sun is in my eyes and I can't see, and I'll think it's time, and I'll oh no, it isn't. So that gets
Or just a
annoying.
distracted driver as well.
Yeah.
The amount of people on cell phones here in the Bay is
Right.
insane.
If you just start going every time you hear it ding and you don't pay attention.
I mean, sometimes I play with those people too. I move
That's a problem.
forward a little bit quickly and then brake.
Yeah.
But they just, in the peripheral of their
Yeah.
vision, see movement. So then they're just on their phone, but they hit the accelerator pedal and then look up. And
Get off your phones, people.
It's hilarious. I mean, it's terrible. But
Partly why, I mean, I'm skeptical of FSD, but I'm also not against the development at all. Like, I think we need that.
I think we
because-
need more competition. I think
Yeah.
Super Cruise needs to roll out some city street
Sure.
applications for it. I mean, they're doing great with the highway stuff. That's why I really want to try it out, because
Right.
it looks like a really comprehensive system in which it requires mapping.
Right.
But
That's
if
the
that
thing.
means that they can map all, like you have a dedicated team
Mhm.
mapping all these different roadways,
Mhm.
it means that you should have a lot of road that is covered by Super Cruise.
You should. Only issue is, as you can experience, there's a lot of construction and changes that happens on highways and stuff.
But
which-
at that point, I would say for both of us, we still do get tentative with FSD or Autopilot
Oh,
trying
yeah.
to deal with construction.
anywhere.
Yeah, so even that, I wouldn't say a gotcha, but more of just like that variable that we
Yeah.
have to consider. Someone's still going to take over then,
Yeah.
because, oh no, it's construction. It's a different system or
Mhm.
different environment that you have to navigate around.
Right.
Okay, I guess I'm driving for this portion of it since there's
Right.
construction, but that's all right. For
Yeah.
the roadway behind, I enjoyed Super Cruise, and then the roadway past,
Sure.
maybe I can still enjoy it, but also that depends on how long the construction's going on at
Right.
that location.
Well, I just mean I appreciate the fact that if there's a road closure or like a couple lanes are closed, I can still turn on autopilot if we're stuck, because a bunch of lanes are now closed and we have to move at a mile an hour for
Yep.
3 miles. When that happens, autopilot will still work. It'll still speed up, slow down, and stay between the lines. Whereas if you're relying on the pre-mapped, it's going to say, hey, that's different. I don't work now. And there's still advantages to trying to make a more scalable, like it'll attempt anything. I appreciate that they're trying
Yeah.
to do a non-mapped approach, but I see the advantages of the pre-map. Rivian pre-maps too, I believe.
Yeah, I'm
Driver
wondering
Plus.
if that's going to be their big level 3 push.
That
Is
would be cool.
They're going to take like the Chevy approach, but also the Tesla approach.
Yeah.
Of
yeah.
being able to be adaptive, but also take advantage of mapped roadways.
Right.
Maybe either buying that data from Chevy or GM, which would be really cool, or
I'd
just
love to
develop
see a
on their own.
collaboration.
I want to
some
see a
kind of
collaboration with anyone.
Open source.
Well, I mean, we're seeing it. To be fair, that is happening with Google's Gemini and Mercedes
Oh yeah.
EQS lineup.
They
Is
were
that
doing something.
they're doing level 3, or they're trying to attempt level 3. So that
Right.
is happening. We just have to look into it more.
Yeah, it's very. I know it's very, very, very specific level 3.
Uh-huh.
It's like when the moon and Jupiter are in the right. It's like it can't be raining. It can't be over 40 miles an hour. There has to be a car in front of you. It has to be on pre-mapped.
It's a good start.
But hey, that's still more level 3 than a Tesla.
Yeah.
It's very, very specific. So I understand why people say, don't. I wouldn't necessarily say it's better
Sure.
than FSD, but it is still technically level 3, which is cool.
Right.
And Waymo's even expanding to more sections.
And Zoox.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Neuro as well. All these robo-taxi companies that are trying to be something.
Yeah. And it's,
Or major player.
as we're seeing, it's not scaling quickly, but there's an argument now with Waymo expanding to more regions, more cities, and more areas
Yeah.
that the pre-mapped approach might actually still bring decent results. Whereas the Tesla narrative for years, way back in 2020 or 2019 at Autonomy Day, was, no, pre-mapped is going to take too long. It'll be too complicated. And it's like, well, you were trying to do a generalized approach and you're still not out yet.
Sure.
You still cannot take a robotaxi that's by Tesla, but you can take a Waymo. And they're expanding the number of places those Zoox and those other guys are offering. So
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what Tesla's responses at the end of the year with the Robotaxi
The unveil.
Yeah.
Ooh.
How they're
That's August.
Yeah, how they're going to change the
Oh my
narrative
God.
in their favor.
3 months.
Yeah.
That's
This year's gone by quick, Drew. It's already May.
It's going to be interesting. Even though I lost a lot of respect for Elon after all the layoffs and stuff, I'm still very, very interested in that design.
Sure.
I just want them to talk about design choices. That I love when companies talk about, the design engineering decisions they made.
Yeah. Well, when we've talked with Tello about it and
Yeah.
seen it in person, what some of their early renditions of the truck were.
Right.
Or even it wasn't even a truck at sometimes. Sometimes it was an
Yeah.
SUV. Or even before that, it was a motorcycle.
Right. The motorcycle in Aptera.
Yeah.
Lots of oh, why do you do it this way? Why do you do it like that? Well, this helps with this. This helps us save money.
Well, just seeing how the headlights have changed over time as well on the front. Like
there were some legal reasons for that.
Yeah, they still show off those prototypes.
Right.
And if you're paying attention, it makes you realize, oh, wow, there has been a lot of changes.
Yeah.
Between the betas and the Gamma.
And with Air Shaper, they learned how to improve the aerodynamic drag from their original prototypes, and that actually helped.
Yeah.
Not just the aero, but it helped the interior space.
Mm-hmm.
The computer said that you could make it more aerodynamic by increasing the headroom.
Yeah.
Which was like, oh, sweet. Not only does it get more efficient, but now it's more spacious.
CFD is a software of magic.
Yeah. I love that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels rare that we get that from Tesla, honestly. I get kind of bored with all of the next week the software will do what I claim, because it's just been going on for so long and it doesn't happen. So it's hard for me to get excited by this next update will be mind-blowing. It's like, well, it's Sunday. Yeah, it's been mind-blowing.
FSD rally.
Yeah. It's been mind-blowing for like 6-7 years. You can't continuously be impressed as long as we're still level 2. So the nag, if it does happen, again, my question is, okay, if it's straight up level 3, that is mind-blowing. I would be super excited by that. If they straight up said, you don't have to pay attention. I don't think that's what it is, though. I'm pretty sure it's steering wheel doesn't need a hand on it anymore, but the eye tracking will be there. And you'll still have to pay attention.
Still an improvement.
But you're right. That would be miles in it. Like right now, after using it for a month, I wouldn't pay for it. Mm-hmm. But if they remove the nag, my wife and I were talking about that. She was like, does that make you want it more? And I was like, yeah, kind of. If I just could sit there and watch. Because the more, on tech, we talk about social media and screen time and how it's not good for us and not good for our health. So the more I started thinking about even level 3, I was like, okay, the car drives itself. Now what am I going to do?
Staring at your phone.
I'm going to go on my phone or watch TV on the screen. Is that really what I need more of in my life? I was like, it's probably better for your mental health, even if you're not driving, just to pay attention to your surroundings.
Well, even me commuting to work, I did some working from home for a while, and you get into the slog of, you wake up, you maybe check your phone, you maybe eat some cereal or some breakfast, and ensure that, you eat some breakfast, and then maybe look at your phone to get some entertainment while eating food.
Yeah.
And then you go work from home, which is you're looking at your laptop or your home computer or however you work from home.
Yeah.
You're staring at a screen.
Yeah.
And then once you get done for the day, what do? You go wind down and relax and watch TV and all that, where at least when you're commuting, and this is something that I've noticed with me, there's a screen in the middle of the car that I've got, but...
It'll beep if you look at it.
Yeah, I'm pretty much staring at the road the whole time. And
pretty much.
It's nice stimulation because I'm not looking at pixels anymore.
You're not looking at pixels.
Well, actually, to be fair, I am. It's just Hyundai Ioniq 5s and 6s.
Those pixels.
Those pixels.
Yeah. No, but it's good to, when most of the things you're looking at are so close to your eyes, too.
Yeah.
Like we don't have a very huge house, so our TV's not even that far away from where we're on the couch. And then, you're right. I work on a laptop, which is this far, and then I'm on my phone, which is this far. So when I drive is actually like the only time my eyes really get an extended period to stare off, unless I, make the time, which I try to, like go outside and just enjoy nature. Yeah, but when you're busy, you don't get a lot of slow down times to just sit out and enjoy scenery. But driving is actually one of the most consistent
It forces you
reliable,
to stare.
force you to
not
stare off
extreme.
into the distance.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, even if this was level 3, I should probably just use it as an opportunity to look around. I don't need more screen time, and that's probably how I would utilize a level 3 or 4 system. Is I just go on my phone more.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a perspective I haven't seen entertained. I think a lot of Tesla bulls have this mentality that if Teslas became level 4, like, no one would want any other vehicle. And I don't agree with that. I'm like, it's a cool perk, but for the same reason, we've both run into people in our lives that think EV batteries explode or are radioactive or something or dangerous.
You can't sit in the car while it's charging. It'll electrocute you.
It'll shock you. There's so many people that are skeptical of EVs despite the facts. There would be tenfold that, I think, for robo-taxis. A bunch of people that would just not trust it, even if the data was good.
Yeah.
Even if it was perfectly safe and it was statistically super safe, there would still be a bunch of people that are like, I don't trust it.
I want to park actually right here, or I want to be dropped off exactly right here, and the vehicle doesn't want to go there, so I don't want to take it.
I was thinking about that with the Lucid showroom we went to last night. That parking lot was crazy. It was super packed.
Or just even the discussion that we had. Your wife was asking me and my wife, like, where are we going? Where do we park? And I'm saying, park here. My wife said, no, you should park here.
Yeah.
So there's already a disagreement there. And then, even then, when you got there, you had to make a decision of, where the heck do we even go?
It's super hectic. There were a ton of pedestrians and there was a ton of cars, and cars backed up fighting over parking spaces.
Yep.
And I was like, what's a robo-taxi got to do here?
It's just going to cause some traffic.
You can't just pull over.
Well,
in some places,
to be fair, it probably will if it is indeed a great system. You could say, park me right in front of Cheesesteak Factory right here, which is not my destination, but it's close to where I need to go. And just so happens at that Cheesecake Factory that I'm talking about in this circumstance, which is nearby the Lucid showroom, there is a place where you can kind of stop with your car to drop off pedestrians.
Right, but how do you teach that to a robot?
You have to tell... Yeah, that's the thing, is what kind of interface that you're dealing with.
If you've seen Tesla's own navigation system, it makes stupid route decisions all
even
the time.
It coming to my house, for some reason thinks the driveway is somewhere else sometimes.
Right. It's like, no, go
Or not even
here.
sometimes, all the time. It's just Google Maps.
So it's like, okay, if you think I'm not going to need a car anymore because I can just rely on robotaxis, then it means I'm going to have to get out of the car like a quarter mile from the house now every time because it doesn't want to pull in such and such.
Or another one, when we were leaving the Tesla showroom to go to the Lucid showroom.
Yeah.
My wife and I were stopping to get a little snack because it was a long day.
Yeah.
And we're going to Jack in the Box.
Yeah.
We're not sponsored by Jack in the Box, but
not yet.
Not yet.
Or ever.
FSD Jack in the Box. But it wanted to take a roadway it wanted to turn left on a roadway where there was no left turn for it because that roadway was underneath us.
Oh yeah, the parking garage throws everything off too.
That as well.
Yeah.
That's a really great one because I was helping a friend move up on the peninsula.
Yeah.
Very far, like pretty much San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And I went to go supercharge the car once I got up there.
Yeah.
And it said, here's the supercharger. And I went to it. It's a parking garage. Mm-hmm. And I figured, is it on the bottom? No. Okay, go up to the next level. Nope. I go 6 levels, and finally it's at the very top. How's the car going to recognize?
But to the map, it's just a flat.
It's just flat.
Charger's here.
The charger's on this side. Look, there's no charger.
And that's a whole edge case that I don't think has even been explored yet. Like, they're working right now, he said, I think
reverse summon.
They're trying to work on bridging the gap between you've arrived and then automatically activate auto park.
Yeah.
They need those two software stacks to collide. And sure, if the supercharger's just at a parking lot, that's pretty simple. Get close enough and then look for a space.
Yeah, like the V4 that we visited last time.
But if it's something like that where the car needs to charge, but it has to go up 6 levels to get there and pull a ticket.
Right.
In some places, how the heck are you going to navigate
such a
complex? You have to train all of the data. How does it pull a ticket, for one? Yeah. And for two, especially when Tesla puts chargers in these parking garages, they're going to have to just label them as don't go there, I guess. That's probably the quickest solution. Don't go in a parking garage.
That would
Can't
be
charge
annoying.
there.
Well, if that's kind of tough to say because if we're talking about
There's a
robo
lot of them.
taxis that can go far distances on highways, then you have to consider we have to skip all of these superchargers in this area because they're
There's a ton.
all in parking lot or parking structures that require you to grab a ticket and pay.
And so far, auto park, vision-based auto park does not work in slanted spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I tested that. I tried, and it would not do it no matter what angle. It was just like, no, it sees the lines, but and it also will never pull forward. It only will back in, I think because of the backup camera.
Sure, it's got more cameras pointing back.
They don't feel comfortable going forward, which there are some chargers where you have to pull forward.
Yeah.
Because they put them out a little bit more. The V4 I went to in Roseville, you would have to pull forward to charge. And the Teslas won't do that now. So
no, they back in.
This is why I don't look at the robotaxi thing as a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I see it as a very long, tedious trail where
there's some carrots on it.
Occasional coins you can pick up here and there. But the legality, the risk, the regulatory approval, the liability of what happens when it messes up. Now you have to beef up the legal team. Does the revenue the robotaxi generate cover the added risk and liability concerns? Which is why I don't value it as like, oh, well, that will turn into a massive cash pile. It's like, no. Knowing how slowly Tesla kind of rolls out features here and there,
sure,
robotaxis will probably be rolling out from them very similar to Waymo, where it's like, here, within these blocks during these hours, it works. And the Tesla bulls will say, oh, it's out, it's happening, it's really, and it's like, oh, it's just kind of here, and now it's here a little bit, but it wasn't this like massive influx of revenue.
I was thinking time-based, you could pretty much, what's funny is like we've got the whole silly driver score. Was it safety score?
Yeah.
The safety score.
It does nothing now.
Where you can't really drive at night because it's going to bring down your score.
It has.
But maybe that's how they capitalize on robotaxis. Is the robotaxis only drive at night for like full capability of everything.
That's what Waymo did, I think, for a while.
They just drove at night.
Yeah, they said you can only... It's only driverless. They'll put a driver in it in the day. But then there's driverless between like midnight and 4 a.m.
Yeah, because the streets of SF are a little bit quieter compared to the...
Low traffic, well lit.
Yeah.
Simple routes. And then a
simple.
Yeah. Well, it's like a lot of it's just like, stop sign, traffic light.
It is a lot of
grid, traffic
yeah.
light. Which I've heard people say that and post the videos like, look, it drove around through the city. And I'm like, okay, to a certain extent, though, this is kind of a lot of 90-degree turns.
Yep.
Which is relatively simple.
Versus on-ramps and off-ramps that
or
can be
rural
complex.
Areas.
Or, yeah, those
where
two.
The lines, that's what I kept running into, I was like, you're drifting into this lane, now you're drifting where the lane lines aren't painted that great.
Roundabouts and all that.
Yeah, it gets confused, and there's a lot of blind turns in more rural communities where you can hardly see.
Every time I get to a stop sign, I think about what you said of pinning your head against the back of the headrest.
Yeah, it can only see back here.
And you can only use your peripherals to kind of look. You can't turn your head, really. Yeah. And that's what it's having to do.
And I can tell, using it on a lot of bad corners for that month I had it, I can see better than it can.
Yeah.
Because it will be creeping, and I can see a car coming, and it won't stop creeping until the car gets really close. And it makes them super nervous, and then it has to stop when it finally does see them. But it's way off.
At that point, it's in the intersection.
It's close, or it's way over the line. And it's like, if we want this to be safer than a human, you'd think it should see better than a human. But
which is why I see LiDAR making a lot of sense, because it's able to get a sweeping image and get that time-based and distance-based reading of what's going on.
I think LiDAR starts to fall apart with bad weather.
Yep.
But
which is why you then not push back, but fall back on other sensors that you've got in your suite.
That would help. I'm not convinced LiDAR is crucial, but
it's a great tool.
I don't think that I don't think the current camera setups are. well optimized.
No, not on the current Teslas.
I
at
think
least.
a bumper camera would go a long way, and a way to look down.
Well, even
big
thinking
turns.
of the repeater cameras,
Mm-hmm.
put one not just facing back but facing forward.
Yeah, because that's ahead of where the driver is.
Yeah.
So if it could look down the street further than I could, that would, I think I'd have a very different opinion of
Well,
it.
both down the street and
Side to side.
side to side.
Because if it's a robot driving, I would like it to see more than I can see.
Sure.
And right now that's not the case. And from what I've read, their current camera positioning was determined by Mobileye.
Yep.
Back when they were using Mobileye to do Autopilot, and then they just never changed it from that.
Yeah.
And Mobileye wasn't meant to be a level 5. So I'm like, why? Especially with hardware 4, I felt like that would have been a good opportunity to mix it up a bit. Like, let's improve the visibility here and here so there's no blind spots. But,
Yeah.
oh well.
I guess
We'll
a final
see.
thought that I have, or at least something that I'm excited to talk about maybe in the next podcast,
Sure.
is the opposite of what robotaxi is, which is EVs going to a manual transmission-like feel. Especially with the Hyundai Ioniq 5N.
Oh, yeah.
That's proving to be something that
The transmission.
will definitely, at least in my wife's eyes,
Yeah.
makes the possibility of an electric Mustang coupe
Mm.
a lot more real and a lot more exciting.
Okay.
For a long
Yeah.
time, she thought an electric Mustang coupe would be cool,
Mm-hmm.
but it won't have that shifting feel that's
Sure.
exciting. And like, even though it's inefficient,
Yeah.
it's all about the driver experience with
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these guys, or
That's
just
true.
people who enjoy driving experience, not
Sure.
necessarily just getting to A to B, but in a very exciting manner.
Yeah.
So-
Get to explore both avenues.
Yeah,
Driver removal, driver enhancement.
exactly.
Better experience. Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts, Drew?
It's an exciting time. I feel like, as far as technology is concerned, I feel like this is kind of the most interesting thing going on because you have this transition and you have so many different approaches, which I'm grateful for, honestly. I'm glad it's not just a bunch of skins on the same thing. I'm glad we have...
Well, we have that with crossovers.
Right.
But
they're not alone.
No, that's not the whole market.
Right.
thankfully.
A lot of legacy auto tends to blur together a bit with just here's our logo on another electric crossover. But then I'm glad that we have ambitious startups that are like, here's the Gravity trying to be super efficient. Let's see how aero and how miniaturized we can make our powertrain to maximize storage space. It's like close to the same storage space as a Cybertruck, honestly, which is nuts considering how much smaller it is. And then you have brands like Rivian that are more adventure focused, and they're like, how do we make our designs futuristic but also friendly?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, how well they've captured that. And then the newer guys coming up like Aptera
Or Tello.
or Tello.
Very different ideas of
Yeah.
how to transport a human from A to B
Rethinking.
and what utility you can have with
Right.
that body.
And they're both in very different stages of development.
Yeah,
now.
Aptera's
Aptera
closer to production.
very close to production, and then Tello's in the like refine the design first.
We're getting the team together to
Yeah.
get it closer to somewhat of a product that can
Right.
be manufactured.
So it's cool to be able to analyze and watch companies in all these different stages simultaneously with all their different approaches, which is why this is so fun for me, and I could do it all day. I could just talk about these things and go out and try them and review them, and efficiency and performance and adventuring and off-roading, and just it's a fascinating industry that's unfolding that it feels like just a couple of years ago we were looking at Rivian and Lucid the way we're looking at Aptera now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is that a real company? Have they delivered? No, not yet, but they're trying to. They're working on it. And I think another couple of years from now, it could be a very different landscape in regards to hopefully electric trucks becoming more affordable, more three-row options, and also just cheaper across the board options.
Sure.
And then Tesla's also going to have some cyber cab thing going on.
Who knows what it looks like.
Whatever happens, I'm here for all of it. I think it's fun seeing like, I don't think you're going to hit level 5, but try.
Sure.
Let's watch what happens when they try. Because that would be pretty nutty. It's like, hey, you don't have to buy the newest Tesla. You can just ride in one.
Sure.
That's a lot cheaper than buying one or even leasing one. We'll get together in the Bay probably and do some ride-along video in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Be like, let's test them. Let's see what it's like.
Did we just go another podcast without talking about Tello? I feel like we haven't talked about our Tello experience, in which we might have
Probably.
to push. All right.
We should. Well, Randy wants to hear it too.
Yeah.
We'll wait for Randy.
So again, we'll push it back.
This is a good one because Randy doesn't like talking about Lucid. So we saved the Lucid talk for the in-person.
It works. Well,
sounds good.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, maybe.
Bye.
Bye.